the weekly Grunt and Groan, professional wrestling in Tyler prior to World War II. This program was originally presented to the Smith County Historical Society on September 6, 2016. I don't know how many of you saw this article in Sunday's newspaper, but it seems we had a professional wrestling match last Saturday here in Tyler. Do I have timing or what? George Jones, the organizer, is quoted at the end as saying, "The entire goal is to reintroduce something that Tyler used to have years ago." I'm here to tell you this evening that during the late 20s into 1940, professional wrestling was big business in Tyler and shared the sports page headlines with the semi-pro Tyler Trojans baseball team and the Tyler High School football team. My primary source of information will be those newspaper articles, along with an online database of historic wrestlers and some really interesting books on the topic. Wrestling is generally considered one of the two original sports, the other being foot races. It seems that whenever two big guys got together, they needed to settle who was the toughest. Here in the United States, George Washington wrestled as a young man. So did Abraham Lincoln, and so did Teddy Roosevelt. Different ethnic groups and nationalities introduced various styles of wrestling from Ireland and different regions of England, and eventually other areas of the world, such as jiu-jitsu from Japan. By the late 19th century, the predominant styles were Greco-Roman and catch as catch can, with catch as catch can becoming dominant in the professional arena. In that style, wrestlers could win a match by either submission or pin, and most matches were best 2 of 3 falls. It did not require a specific opening stance, and it didn't bar any particular holes, including below the waist holes, although the Police Gazette rules did disallow choke holes. More and more of the promoters and wrestlers came from the carnival circuits, where the touring wrestler would challenge all comers, tease the challengers along to up the ticket sales and bets, and then use their skills to take the local country boys down. Promoters recognized that audiences became bored with holds that held for long periods of time. They wanted action and thrills and showmanship. Promoters also realized that they could control the wrestlers as they set up territories, scheduled matches, and established new stars. Matches became worked or arranged with good guys or baby faces and bad guys or heels. Faces fought scientific, which is clean and by the rules, while heels fought rough or dirty with biting, punching, and tricks. Often handsome or former football college star wrestlers became the faces, while older, fatter, or the foreign-born became heels, but not always. This became standard by about 1930. And to spice things up, there were mysterious masked men, lots of ethnic wrestlers, women wrestlers, and 2 bears who came through Tyler. We had straight matches, team, but not tag team matches here yet, and wrestle royals, any sort of gimmick, any sort of persona, special referees, out-of-control wrestlers, whatever it took to get people back into the arena audience week after week in this age before television. So why did people go to professional wrestling matches knowing that they were likely worked? Bill Cunningham, in an article in Collier's Magazine, 1932, wrote, "It's an education to watch a wrestling crowd in a good wrestling town. They seem to know the routine of the performance perfectly. The drama is almost always staged in 3 parts. In the first, the eventual winner takes the aggressive and exerts his superiority in clean, gentlemanly fashion. He ignores the off-color tricks of his brutish opponent and wins the crowd to his side by his speed, skill, and sportsmanship. The second phase sees the star of the roughneck opponent slowly going into ascendance. Our hero fights back, and the battle is fairly even, but the dirty tactics of the enemy are beginning to tell. The third phase begins with the eventual winner slowly getting in a bad way from the viciousness and unorthodoxy of the enemy. He's butted out of the ring or savagely rabbit punched, or perhaps kneed or badly crippled with a leg spread or some such. Just as the thing has gone about as far as it humanly can, with the crowd booing the rough guy and voicing sympathy for his exhausted victim, The victim suddenly comes off the floor with a terrific flying tackle and knocks the other guy colder than 40 quarts of ice cream. Yet knowing how the battle will develop, the audience all comes back next week, and most of them bring a friend. Why? Because whatever it is or isn't, it's a sensational thing to watch. Since the football influence shook it up and made it fast, and the promoters leavened it with some rough and salty humor, it's a hard-boiled and hilarious evening for anybody, anytime. Gerald Morton and George O'Brien in Wrestling to Wrasslin, Ancient Sport to American Spectacle, have another opinion. The fans who attend the matches are able to release their hostilities. They see in the villains the foreman who gave them a bad day, the rude telegraph worker, the customer who wrote the false check, all the feelings of anger that they have kept stored inside out of a sense of social decorum can flood forth. The beating the villain takes can become, for the fans, the beating that someone else deserved. But what wrestling does as ritual that helps us through bad times is that it does prove that villains can be defeated, that heroes who embody good American ideals can win, and that, whatever else, determination and dedication can and do triumph over deceit and treachery. As many of you know, Tyler has a problem with missing newspapers for many years, so I can't be certain of the first professional wrestling match in town. Dallas and Houston were holding regular matches by 1904. Billy Edwards fought in Marshall in 1909. This is the first ad that I found in the Tyler paper, January 19, 1911, at the New Theater, Hussein Yusuf, the Terrible Turk, versus Giant Jones, champion of the South. You can guess who was the face and who was the heel. The Tyler newspaper reporter, in his account of the match, made a point to say that a cleaner and more interesting wrestling match was never seen anywhere. I did not find another account from the period of the paper that I've indexed, ending in 1921. But when I picked the microfilm back up in 1927, I did find a match in November. The sports writer says it's the first performance of this nature in this city in years, so perhaps there wasn't one in between. In this match, Harry Kaufman wrestled Carl Sampson, and professional wrestling would roll along steadily in Tyler from 1927 until 1940. So who ran our local matches? Here's a list of the wrestling managers that I've pulled from about 13 years of newspapers. Some were here only a short period. Others stayed a number of years. Some liked being in the limelight, and others worked more behind the scenes. The most important were Pa Green and George Jones. Our headliner wrestlers were usually lined up in Dallas, although the fighters themselves came from everywhere. I don't think I ever saw a Saturday night bout, and seldom a Friday night one. Tyler and other smaller towns helped fill in during the week, creating enough bouts for everyone to make a living. The same wrestlers that we saw would also appear in Dallas, Waco, Shreveport, Houston, Tulsa, and Beaumont. Our local boxing and wrestling commissioner was Ed Fleck, who is buried at Oakwood Cemetery. He might make a very interesting spirit someday. Wrestlers came with their own managers. Without a doubt, the most interesting manager to come to Tyler was Count Pietro Rossi, a quaint little bearded man with a monocle, a cane, semi-formal wearing apparel, and an accent reminiscent of the Bronx. I just wish I had a good photo of him to share. Timekeepers were almost never mentioned, and that left the referees. Sometimes refs came in from elsewhere, such as Art What a Man Shives, first baseman for the Fort Worth Cats. Sometimes they were local, such as John Rosie Kilpatrick, a former Tyler motorcycle cop, and Buddy Veal of the Tyler Fire Department. Often they were other professional wrestlers, and sometimes there were very special referees. Jack Dempsey refereed twice, once in 1933 and again in 1934. In that match, for the second fall, both Bob Montgomery and Elmer Guthrie came out strong. Montgomery had been arguing with Dempsey throughout, especially when the latter would pull him off Guthrie, when Montgomery had used dirty tactics. Time after time, when Montgomery was slugging, Dempsey would slap him hard with his open palm. Other times, Dempsey would grab Bob's head to pull him away. Montgomery had slugged Guthrie several times and almost had him going. Dempsey warned him to desist. Montgomery persisted, and Dempsey disqualified him after 9 minutes of wrestling and held up Guthrie's hand as winner. The loser flew into Guthrie, and Dempsey stepped in to pull him away. Montgomery swung at Dempsey, and the former boxing champ mixed it up with him, but not until after he, with Guthrie's aid, had broken a headlock Montgomery had upon him. Dempsey placed several short stabs into the wrestler's ribs and held his head back with his left and his right fist drawn back, giving an imitation of his going in for the kill in the days when he earned the title of the Manasseh Mauler. Montgomery, having recognized this stance, probably remembering what had happened to Jess Willard, Jack Johnson, Ferpe, Carpentier, and even Turney, and perhaps a few others, decided all at once that he didn't want to fight anymore, and his courage deserted him. He finished by taking his part of the argument out in oral denunciation of the fans as Guthrie and Dempsey crawled through the ropes and left him alone. How much money did the wrestlers make? That was seldom mentioned, but a Tyler reporter noted that for one match in July 1928, the winner was guaranteed $300 and the loser $50, with both getting a percentage of the gate and a guarantee. And where did they fight? All over downtown and at the Trojans' baseball field. That 1911 match was in the new theater, and I'm not sure exactly where that was. In 1927, at 105 South Broadway, just south of the courthouse on the west side, in the old Owl Garage. In 1928, at the Armory Hall, 216.5 West Irwin, just east of the Oddfellows Hall. Over 300 spectators could be seated there. Well, there were two major problems for wrestling and where to have the matches: bad weather and no air conditioning. When the weather got warmer, they switched to the Trojan baseball park in northeast Tyler between Line and Locust. Billy Lee erected a strong ring near the grandstand with lighting and with a separate section for black spectators. Amateur baseball was played at the field at the fairgrounds, and wrestling matches were held there too. Then the fall rainy weather set in, and they moved to the Shields building on South Spring, across from the jail. Billy Lee bragged that his new arena would be heated for the comfort of fans. In 1929, wrestling moved to the upper floor of a building in front of the post office. This was once referred to as Reike's Roof Garden Arena. The next year, over Star Dry Goods Store, 118 West Irwin, on the southwest corner of the square. Bleacher seats on two sides and ringside seats on two sides. In 1931, over Lip State Dry Goods on the east side of the square. In 1932, on the clay lot at the end of West Locust, which had been used for years as a site for tent shows. This was a canvas-topped arena, seating 1,000. 900 square yards of canvas covering 7,000 square feet. They went back inside in 1933 at the Tyler Athletic Club, 107 West Ferguson, roughly mid-block on the northwest side. And in the summer of '33, back to the baseball park at the fairgrounds. In 1934, on North Broadway, east side of the street next to the movie theater. Then finally, in 1934, promoter George Jones bought the building on West Locust, now cut through to Bonner, about where Goodwill is now, and it became known as the Athletic Arena. When that site was sold in 1940, there were definite plans to construct another multi-purpose building on West Irwin, near the North Lyons South Forest intersection, but evidently that one was never completed. Until that dream collapsed, matches were held at the baseball field at the fairgrounds. It was not cheap, relatively speaking, to go see wrestling. Tickets could be bought at various times at Coker's Drug Store, Hicks Watson Drug Store, Bryan's Bookstore, Herman's Cafe, and Mecca Cafe. This 1927 ad had ringside seats at $1.65 and a general admission at 75 cents. While this one has $1 for ringside and 75 cents for general admission, 50 cents for school students, and 25 cents for children under 12. Reporters often noted that men, women, and children were in attendance. Throughout the 13 years of wrestling, women were often given cut rates or even got in free with another paid admittance. In 1928, promoter Billy Lee let the ladies in free and gave out a good-sized numbers of turkeys and chickens. Sarah McClendon, girl reporter, aged 22 in 1932, either volunteered or was assigned to report on Tyler women attending the local matches. She wrote, "The keen zest for the fight and the smell of blood which women here show the wrestling match when they forget to look charming for a moment and show faces relaxed is reminiscent of Kipling's more deadly female and the Roman ladies who adored the gory fights in the amphitheater. Break it off, kill him, beat him, dude, you can do it," is called out by the same voice that rocked the baby to sleep a few hours before. And at times, women most attractively dressed in the last word of feminine get-out become so excited in their ringside positions that they go so far as to help put back a wrestler thrown out of the ring or take part in the fight themselves. Men spectators gasped Wednesday night and then rocked with laughter when Paul Orth, thrown out of the ring by Joe Capecchi, started hurling a chair only to be confronted by a woman sitting next who picked up one and started after him herself. She happened to be rooting for Joe. And when Paul appeared to be choking Joe in the dashing, exciting semifinal, in a position near the ropes where referee Pat McKee could not see, the woman jumped to the rescue and loosened Paul's hold. For a long time, we watched the girl with the Empress Eugenie hat and veil and the gold dangles in her ears. She was still being superior. But after Dude Chick and Fred Kupfer almost tumbled in her lap in a grappling hold, she immediately realized she was in Rome and acted accordingly. And isn't it just the type of woman, but is sometimes the society woman or girl who planned to see a match wearing an air of shocked refinement, who finds before it's over that she is yelling louder than the men? Some women enjoy the match all the more for knowing little or nothing about wrestling, and their sideline comments certainly bring a smile to the faces of many men. Perhaps that's one reason boys like to take their dates. Some women seem, on the other hand, to know a great deal about wrestling and can name almost every hold taken. What to wear to a wrestling match? Why, sports togs leaning more to costumes suitable for streetwear are best. One ardent sportswoman here wore a brown, severely tailored tweed suit, a man's shirt and tie, and close-fitting felt hat in brown when she attended the match Wednesday night. Another prominent oil man's wife came dressed in black and white costume, while others wore street dresses. The favorite costume seems to be light-colored skirt with blouse and jacket. I don't know if African-American wrestlers had their own circuit going, like in baseball. If they did, it wasn't reported to the Tyler Courier-Times. This 1928 article indicates that while black boxers were not uncommon, this was the first black wrestling match. It used local talent, Osmond Garrett of the Blackstone Hotel versus Ed Rabin of Dobbs Furniture Company, and Charlie Crawford, a barber, versus Lester Skeeter Haggerty, who worked in highway repair. In 1933, out-of-town wrestlers were brought in. Wild Bill Coates of Houston versus Dynamite Dan of Kansas City, and the Corsicana Kid versus Kid Whirlwind. However, black men only fought black men, while every other ethnicity mixed it up. On 4 different occasions, women wrestlers were featured in Tyler. The first was Clara Mortensen in 1935. She was the 19-year-old daughter of the former lightweight champion of Sweden, and her opponent was a man, not a woman. According to the newspaper the next day, Miss Mortensen wasted no time in tearing into her opponent. She slammed him, she punched his jaws, she pulled his hair, and she went through the regular routine as all wrestlers do. Her ability was unquestioned. She simply was the better man, and she showed it. Mortensen was back in 1937, wrestling Helen Wilson. As was expected, the grappling bout between the two women contestants stole the show at Thursday night's weekly mat program at the Tyler Athletic Arena. Those fans who went expecting to see a sissy affair were shocked. They put on a bout that would be a credit to any of the greats of the grunt and groan industry. Hair-pulling wouldn't start it. They fought all the way. No man wrestler ever did as much twisting, squirming, and tussling as the two girls did on the special attraction. They were Miss Clara Mortensen and Miss Helen Wilson, and in the end, it was Miss Mortensen's experience that won the victory. Mortensen came back through the next year, matched with Mildred White from Chicago. The Tyler paper stated, "Women's bouts are no pink tea parties, as fans who have seen them will verify. In the last bout between two grapplerettes here, the going got pretty rough when the women got to pulling each other's hair. Fighting much in the style of two bantam chickens, the femmes went at each other with their full energy and strength. The girl champ showed she was a champion in another style also, hair pulling. They fought inside the ring for a good while and finally edged out of the ropes into the ringside, where they continued tussling, with Miss Mortensen being shoved down in the lap of a spectator." Billy Edwards arranged the final women's match in 1940 between Mildred Burke and Marie Carroll. Burke was the World Women's Champion for almost 20 years. And then there were the Bears. Teddy the Bear fought Bulldog Roberts from Shreveport in 1931, and Teddy won. Then in December 1939, Billy Edwards lined up Hippo the Bear to fight Dan O'Connor from Boston. Edwards pointed out that it was difficult to convince a bear to take a fall. And sure enough, Hippo took out O'Connor pretty quickly and chased the ref around the ring during intermission. But how about the regular matches? 2 to 3 matches, 1 day a week, for most of 13 years. Most were basically catch as catch can, often with Texas rules, or almost anything goes. But Tyler also got to see jiu-jitsu wrestling, Hindu-style wrestling, which uses the feet more, and Japanese judo jacket wrestling. We had our fair share of masked men, although this has to be the absolute worst image in the newspaper. We had the Red Masked Marvel, the Russian Red Terror, the Mascarador, Masked Marvel, Purple Flash, Mysterious Ace, Red Devil, Red Shadow, and Superman. Usually there was a series of bouts in which the masked man was supposed to be revealed if he lost, but there were always various reasons he did not do it, the better to prolong the story. We had our exotic fighters, such as Mustafa Pasha, the Terrible Turk, Achu, Tiger Dala, the Tiger of India, Prince Bhupindar, Ali Baba, and Oki Shikani. Many men fought just under their own names, but others had colorful handles such as Charlie Lehman, the Flying Dutchman, Joe Banaski, the Minnesota Flash, Joe Stengel, the Iowa Speed Demon, Art Mott, the Colorado Tornado, Joe Stetson, the Arizona Whirlwind, Chief Little Wolf, Chief Little Beaver, Bob Man Mountain Blair, Big Bad Wolf Jack Odell, Jack Roughhouse Nelson, the Cardiff Giant, Goon Henry, Olaf Popeye Swinson, and Sonny Kuhai, the singing Hawaiian. The best nationally known wrestlers who came to Tyler were probably Ed Strangler Lewis, 6-time World Heavyweight Champion, Everett Marshall, National Wrestling Association World Heavyweight Champion twice, Lou Thez, 6-time World Champion and NWA World Heavyweight Champion 3 times, and Joe Stetcher, 3-time World Heavyweight Champion. But those were not my favorites. Some wrestlers would come to Tyler and stay a while before heading off to the next series elsewhere, then double back. Locals came to know to hate or to love them. Billy Edwards, born in 1889 in Nebraska, lived his early life in Kansas City. He came to professional wrestling from the carnivals and became the consummate heel. Some credited him with the invention of the Texas Death Match, or Texas Rules. At one Dallas fight in 1931, he refused to allow Jack Dempsey to release his hold on an opponent and took a swing at Dempsey instead. The ex-champ responded with a left and a short right that lifted the villain off the mat, just as Edwards wanted. Had to eat soup for 3 days, Edwards said years later, just couldn't chew, but what a gag. His signature move, and almost all wrestlers had a signature move, was a chiropractic headlock. One Tyler reporter hesitantly followed him back to his dressing room after a bout and found that after the match was over, Edwards was a courteous gentleman, comparing him to Jekyll and Hyde. He was our last promoter before World War II and was killed in a car wreck in January 1941 near Hillsborough. The Dallas Morning News, in his obituary, called him the greatest wrestling attraction the Southwest ever knew. Juan Humberto, king of the Mexican light heavies, supposedly from Mexico City, but some say born in El Paso, he was new into Dallas in 1931, but also repeatedly wrestled here in Tyler. He was often described as flashy and was, from all accounts, a favorite with the ladies. He fought into 1964. Lucky Sarah McClendon got a second byline on a wrestling story when she interviewed Whiskers Savage about when he might get married. She described him as the 8-man wrestler who was stalking the streets of Tyler Monday, shaking his massive head of hair, very much resembling a buffalo instead of a man. This hillbilly from the Kentucky mountains came to town to defend his title as wrestling, he would call it scuffling, champion of the world. Actually, Leo Savage was a failed fighter until he came up with the persona of a mountain man who just showed up at a Beaumont Arena in 1935 wanting to scuffle. One author called him the biggest thing to hit Texas since Sam Houston sent General Santa Anna packing. He lived his character every day, as if he had been rebaptized in a jug of corn mash. His signature move was his bear hug. Chief Chuchki, and that could be spelled many different ways, claimed at times to be half gypsy and half Cherokee, and both mother and father taught him to hate white people, especially white men with beards. He was considered the father of illegal foreign objects in the ring. In fact, the Tyler crowd's reaction to that was why Chuchki asked for police protection. 2 weeks before, he had attempted to strangle Glenn Wade with a small wire which he had pulled from the inside of his shoe. As the paper noted, everywhere he appears, he usually pulls something of this sort, and it is because of this that the fans are always against him. He was suspended by just about every athletic authority that ever sanctioned a match. And there were so many more. I've chosen a few Tyler paper wrestling accounts to give you a little flavor of what attending a match might have been like. And yes, Billy Edwards figures in more than his fair share of them. One from March 8, 1929. Tyler fans were treated to another thrilling mat battle last night at the new arena when Kala Pasha Gobar, the Turk, defeated Eddie Worth, Detroit sensation. The match was bitterly fought, and it was about even until Eddie was caught napping and was kicked in the tummy by the Turk, who picked him up and tried to break the new ring down with a body slam, which ended the match. Here, fans charged the ring, and tries went out to kill the Turk, the dirty brute, and all manners of things that could be said in public. It looked for a time that Gobar would have to have police protection. At one time, Eddie clamped a short-armed scissor on the Turk, and it looked like he'd win the fall, but Gobar wiggled to the ropes to release the hold. He left the ring and crawled in the lap of one of the front-row cash customers, who stuck a lighted cigar to Kala's rear division, and he moved quick. January 12, 1934. Thursday night's wrestling card at the Tyler Athletic Arena on West Irwin Street ended in a near riot, which was participated in by wrestlers, the referee, the promoter and fans, with each principal receiving at least one healthy sock on the kisser to make him remember that the Grunt and Groan boys do take punishment while in the ring. At last reports, promoter George Jones was nursing a sore jaw as the result of having been floored 4 successive times. Billy Edwards was still explaining why he could have been awarded the contest. Norrell Jurlstrom was congratulating himself on having beaten the big bad Edwards. Referee Ab Smurl was telling his friends in Jacksonville that never again would he be the third man in the ring with those 2 men. At least 2 fans were trying to explain black eyes away at home. August 30th, 1934. After repeatedly being warned about using his fist, Billy Edwards attempted to use them again to gain a victory over Marvin Westenberg of Los Angeles here Wednesday night at the Tyler Athletic Arena, and referee Cyclone Fox disqualified him, giving Westenberg the match. When the referee's decision came, the audience arose as one, cheering and booing Edwards' protest. After Westenberg had won the first fall in 18 minutes with a series of flying tackles and a body pin, Edwards came back for the second fall. Edwards started rubbing a soapy-looking substance, which later turned out to be Limburger cheese, over Westenberg's face. The fans protested to such an extent that referee Fox had to stop the match and search Edwards' shorts to see if he had any more of the cheese hidden. December 10th, 1935. Last week's no-contest wrestling bout at the Tyler Athletic Arena between Bobby Stewart from Birmingham, Alabama, and Billy Edwards, side-burned roughster from Kansas City, will likely be settled here Wednesday night at the arena when the pair again clash with 2 referees in the ring and 3 judges in the ringside section. The event last week was ruled a no contest by State Wrestling Inspector Ed Fleck after Edwards scattered sneezing powder in the eyes of Stewart, and the referee as well. After this happened, Fleck ordered the pair to come back for a return match or face suspension charges. June 18th, 1937. Dr. Carl Sopolis of Boston defeated Billy Edwards of Kansas City in the main event of Thursday night's weekly mat program. But a riot at the end of the first fall of the semifinal with referee Tommy O'Toole in the stellar role completely stole the show. It was the wildest bit of action ever seen in the local arena, and before the affair was finally brought to an end, O'Toole had given Chief Little Beaver, Indian grappler, a sound thrashing, knocked Sarpolis flat on the mat twice, tossed promoter George Jones out of the ring 4 consecutive times, and lambasted 2 spectators, knocking both out of the ring. He was absolutely uncontrollable. 3 men who were unable to hold him at one time, and in attempting to hold him, they broke down the top strand of ropes. Every bit of Irish blood in his veins was boiling, and he failed to quit until he had literally mopped up everyone that came in the ring. July 9th, 1937, pulling a shoestring out of his trunks and twisting it around the neck of his opponent, Tommy O'Toole, for several minutes before most of the fans even knew what was going on. Lou Plummer was finally caught by referee Frank Brown and disqualified in the second fall of their match here Thursday night. Referee Brown gave O'Toole the match after discovering Plummer's trick. March 18th, 1938. Billy Edwards, veteran mat roughster, lost his 3rd consecutive match to the Masked Marvel Thursday night at the Tyler Athletic Arena, but only after he had given the mysterious grappler plenty of trouble. By losing the match, Edwards will have to push the Marvel's manager, Count Pietro Rossi, around the courthouse square in a wheelbarrow. So anxious was the Kansas City wrestler to get a return bout with the Marvel, he made the unique wager that if he lost, he would push the Count around the square, and should he win, the bewhiskered Count will have to wheel him around. Edwards will push Count Rossi in the wheelbarrow at noon Friday, beginning at the Mecca Cafe. And September 23, 1938. A soap battle resulted in one of the featured bouts on the weekly grappling program at the Tyler Athletic Arena Thursday night. After Whiskers Savage won the first fall from Sid Neighbors, the Jackson, Tennessee roughster, Neighbors came back in the second fall and attempted to use soap in his opponent's eyes. Whiskers then grabbed a chunk of soap from neighbors' trunks and proceeded to use it in rubbing neighbors' eyes. The referee mixed in the tilt momentarily, but after Whiskers gave him a bear hug and rubbed a little soap in his eyes, the referee, Harry Cadell of Dallas, was ready to take a quick exit. The only way the trouble was settled was for promoter George Jones to step into the ring and give Whiskers the match, the referee being unable to do so because of soapy eyes. The final bout in the old athletic arena was held in May 22, 1940. Killer Carl Davis versus Babe Tuffy Zaharias, and Ray Eckert versus Angelo Sistoldi. The property had been sold and the arena leveled within the week to make way for a new Lassiter grocery store. A new athletic arena was supposedly under construction on West Irwin near the Highway Wrecking Company, modeled after the one at Waco. The plan was to also use it for small vaudeville shows and attractions. But then, of course, vaudeville was dying as well. Wrestling was moved to Trojan Stadium in Fair Park for the summer, and the last bout held before Pearl Harbor was Superman John Grandovich versus Joe Stetcher and Oki Shekinah versus Roy Graham on September 13, 1940. After Pearl Harbor, many of the wrestlers enlisted in the military, and extensive traveling for matches was difficult. Tyler's attention diverted to the boxing matches at Camp Fannin. Some wrestling revived in May of 1945, but I think I will leave the second chapter in this story to another researcher.